everybody know who I want next. I want Terence Crawford next.
Well, y'all already know who I want. I've been calling him out all day. You know what I mean? Maybe if Spence get his tail out his butt, he'll fight me.
Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford, two of the welterweight division's elite fighters, are to collide in one of the most highly anticipated showdowns on July 29th. A fight of the best fighting the best, and after years of back and forth and delays in the negotiations, we finally see these two top pound for pound fighters get the chance to prove who is the best. With their exceptional skills, boxing IQ, championship pedigree, both fighters possess the tools to claim victory. And in today's tactical overview, I'm going to analyse the respective strengths, weaknesses and strategies for the upcoming super fight that will be legacy defining for both men. So on that note, let's get right into it. First up, let's talk about Terence Crawford. And Bud, going into this fight, is extremely confident he will become undisputed.
I don't think it go the distance.
Whether it do or not, I'm going to be undisputed. I'm going to be undisputed. I'm sitting here telling you right now.
After years of issues in making the fight, while Crawford was obviously promoted by Top Rank, becoming a free agent looks like it was the right decision to get the fight over the line, even if there was issues in the initial negotiations. While it also helps that Bud has come off a pretty convincing performance over David Avanesian last December, and he will be the slightly more active fighter going into this, while Spence last fought in April last year. But let's take a look at what Crawford brings to the table in this fight. Crawford for me has a complete boxing style where he can adapt to whatever boxing style or approach his opponent has, not to mention his tremendous athletic ability. And on top of this, Crawford arguably has the best boxing IQ in the sport, and you could consider him a problem solver who looks to study you in the early rounds before neutralising you or taking you out. And over the years we've seen him box by using a range of different tactics and techniques.
You know, you got my jab, you got my movement, you got my counter punching ability, you got just my brain, the way I think, just all around.
But maybe one of the most difficult aspects his competition finds in the ring is his ability to switch from southpaw to orthodox and vice versa, as Bud is very capable of boxing comfortably from both stances. As Chris Algieri points out how this could play a factor in the fight.
And the thing about it is, both men do what they do so well. It's who does what they do that's gonna win the night. Crawford, you're basically fighting two guys. He can switch sides so seamlessly, and he's got different abilities on either side. It's really something amazing to watch and study.
However, in my opinion, he is always much stronger when fighting out the southpaw stance. And with this being the case, I'm very intrigued to see what he will do versus the southpaw and Spence. We've seen him face past fighters such as Diaz switch between them both, only for him to resort back to his stronger southpaw stance. And I suspect he will look to change up his stance at some point to see how Errol handles this. However, if the orthodox stance doesn't work, I think it would be wise to resort to what he does best. It always makes me think of Hagler versus Leonard, where of course Hagler started the fight in that orthodox stance at the beginning of the fight, only to leave him having to try to come back in the later rounds, where he was much stronger in his southpaw stance. And it's a worthy reminder not to force something when it's not working. Another big part of Crawford's approach could come down to his counter-punching skill set, and Bud possesses impeccable timing and reflexes to do this, allowing him to counter his opponents with devastating accuracy, and don't be surprised if we see him catch Errol out at some point. In terms of Crawford's weaknesses, he has had tendencies to start slow as he instead looks to download what is in front of him, so this could play into Spence's favour, and we've seen Crawford get hit cleanly with unnecessary punches in the early rounds, while we've also seen in the past Crawford looking uncomfortable when a fighter closes the gap and putting Bud under intense pressure on the inside, not allowing him to have the space or time to adapt, as he tends to not fight on the inside, but instead looks to clench. Nevertheless, we saw him up against Avanesium stand and trade using a more Philly shell shoulder roll, and maybe this is a good preparation for the southpaw versus southpaw matchup in Spence. However, going with this approach against Spence still allows him to download that valuable information he needs to take you out or neutralize you. But with all that said and done, let's take a look at the main tactical elements that should be considered for Bud. For me, Terence overall is at best when he's establishing his own rhythm and pace in the fight. One of my favourite examples was against Victor Postol, where he really managed to dictate the pace and range through the lead hand, use of feints and lateral movement, which eventually Postol got frustrated with and looked to close the distance trying to land himself, only for him to get caught with Crawford's catch and counter coming into range. Crawford was really able to fight at the pace he wanted to. Due to his great use of rhythm and timing with his punches, he was then pretty much able to control Postol for the rest of the fight. However, when facing someone like Spence, he'll be going up against a very defensively sound fighter who will instead be looking to establish his own range with his own jab. Regardless if Crawford is southpaw or orthodox, for me, at some point, if he is continually on the back foot and not landing frequently enough on Spence, we're going to have to see Crawford close the distance and possibly trade with Spence at a closer range, or even look to push him back, as if this goes the full 12 rounds in Vegas, the judges may favour the more active and aggressive Spence compared to Crawford's slick defense and countering, as Tim Bradley pointed out.
I have some concerns. I really do. And the first thing that came to mind is can Crawford win a decision in Vegas? You have to understand this. Look at the history of Crawford and the way he starts fights. He's a bit of a slow starter, and you think about the way Spence starts fights. He's quick out the gate. He's consistent with his offense. And going down the stretch, if he gets behind on the scorecards, Crawford, he's going to need a knockout to win in Vegas. And you got to understand that the history of the judging in Vegas. I remember the Floyd Mayweather era where defense was, thought to be great, and you were getting points for defense. But now it has shifted. Now it's more about the aggressive fighter, the fighter that throws more punches. That's what I'm seeing from Vegas judges now. Guys that are in your face, pressing the action, being the aggressor, and we know Spence is that guy. So that's my concern moving forward in this fight. But
regardless of this, I still believe a more cautious boxing first approach while managing the range will work in Bud's favour. But he will obviously have to be ready to bring the heat at some point if Spence is continually using effective aggression, and that is something he's certainly capable of doing. Now, the most obvious tactic for Crawford is to use his superior counterpunching skill set, as he'll usually look to tempt opponents in by giving them different looks, such as a lower lead hand or a high guard, before quickly taking a slight step back and countering with the right hook around the guard, or even beautifully timed uppercuts from a southpaw stance. And if Spence looks to close the distance to land those body shots, there will be an opening for Crawford to land his wide looping hooks and uppercuts on him. However, this could very well leave an opening if he does not time his counters well, or is not defensively sound or proactive after throwing. While another good counter he's used in the past versus southpaws is a quick cross lead hook combination as opponents come into range, which could prove useful versus Spence. Crawford's ability to seamlessly switch stances, I think, should be utilised to get Spence comfortable in terms of what is in front of him. At some point in the fight when Crawford turns southpaw, Spence will once again have to adapt to his game plan. And Errol, of course, has not faced a southpaw since Chris Van Heerden in 2015, and although he has a huge amount of amateur pedigree and of course will be sparring southpaws in preparation for this fight, nothing beats the real experience of being in the ring with one. And the southpaw versus southpaw matchup can be an unusual encounter, and although Spence dominated that fight back in 2015, he would still get caught with looping punches around the guard, which of course Crawford is very good at landing himself. Finally, you can't deny that there are some defensive lapses from Errol's side, which at times he does lunge in with a jab and leave it in a lower position, which therefore leaves openings for counters. And I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't seen clips of Spence getting clipped with those overhand right hands in southpaw orthodox matchups. And if anyone is capable of pulling off a punch like that to hurt Spence, I wouldn't be surprised if Crawford can do it. However, saying that, Spence has been able to really take these punches pretty well. Although maybe he's been shook up a little bit, it's not like we haven't seen Terence in those situations either. And overall, Spence's style of pressure and wanting to stand and trade in front of you does leave him open just generally to counterpunches. And if Crawford's able to hurt him, pounce on Crawford when Spence is hurt, he could just be able to finish off the fight. Now, it's important to look at Errol Spence's strengths and weaknesses, along with how you should approach the fight. Now, for Errol Spence going into this fight, I think it would be fair to say he's the naturally bigger welterweight, and has so far only fought in this weight division his whole career, picking up 3 of the belts in the division, first with an impressive win over Kell Brook in England for the IBF, and then a hard-fought victory over a game Sean Porter. However, it was his devastating car crash that could have seen his career over for good, and I think we can all admit he was extremely lucky to get out alive.
That accident really was God basically knocking on my door, telling me to get back on the right track. You losing it. So I just felt like, that was my warning, and I took heed to it, and I think it changed my life.
With all that being said, many felt Spence would not be the same fighter. However, after Errol recovered, he came straight back against the powerful Danny Garcia, putting on another decisive win. However, his comeback in 2021 was also cut short due to an eye injury, where he was meant to unify with Pacquiao, only for Ugas to get the opportunity. But last year, Errol took all that frustration on the Cuban, more or less beating him up throughout the whole fight and looking very much like he was back to his best. But now let's take a look at what the truth will bring to the table. Errol Spence Jr. overall uses more standard fundamentals and economical movement in his style, so he can apply pressure on his opponent and trade on the inside. However, he is very capable of boxing from an outside position too. But when he's at his best, he's using his heavy, well-timed jab while moving forward with his feet to help push back his competitor, and once he has them where he wants them, he combines his power and precision in combinations, all while alternating between head to body, and vice versa. And that leads me to his body punching, which I'll go into more detail soon. But Spence throws these punches such thudding accuracy at times, wearing down his opponents and snapping away all the resolve with each punch. And this is something I'm very intrigued to see how Crawford copes with at some point in this fight. And even for him, it could be too much. But as much as Spence is powerful and economical in his approach, this does lead him to get caught out with counterpunches, as I discussed before. But in my opinion, I would say that's just more because he puts himself in that position due to his style of fighting, of trying to get in a position to land in the body or fight on the inside. And in a southpaw versus southpaw matchup, we could see him getting caught lunging in trying to land his own left hand on Crawford, which no doubt will see him get countered at times. Defensively, Spence favours using that high guard and subtle linear footwork instead of huge amounts of head movement off the centre line, and if anything, just a slight dip is all that is required to dodge the punch for him, along with taking a step back before then getting back to his pressure. But with all that said, let's take a look at the more tactical elements Errol Spence should consider. Now, one of the best parts of Spence's game is he can be relentless with a pretty simple pressure game by utilising a heavy jab or jab cross at mid-distance, giving him the opportunity to occupy the guard before looking to land in the body. Not only that, he is capable of closing off the ring so he can push you back towards the ropes and corners before he gets the opportunity to sit in his punches and land to the body. And personally, I believe maintaining the pressure will work and get to Crawford eventually. But for me, he needs to be constantly challenging Crawford's lead hand, whatever stance he fights from. Crawford versus Avanesian did a very good job constantly throwing out his lead hand with different strength and rhythm, which really helped to see his opponent get frustrated, only for him to open up. And with Errol mainly using a more classic high guard, he can't let him win the battle of the lead hand or let him get too comfortable using it. And I feel if Spence can throw with Crawford's lead hand and use feints, it may just disrupt his own rhythm and nullify him from setting up counter punches. It is widely acknowledged that Spence excels in targeting his opponent's body, which is one of his strongest skills. He recognises the value of investing in this strategy as it can pay off significantly in the long run.
When you hit guys, it sounds like you're hitting a bag, there's a thud. When you sink it in there, do you know?
Yeah, I know. Your body don't lie. You know, it's just certain little things, like they might breathe a little bit different, they might, you know, inhale heavily, or, you know, the body might dip down. You hit somebody a body shot and they kind of drop a little bit, or their posture changes, or their hands are no longer, you know, up, it's down by where their body is. It takes a lot out of it. It takes your legs, your wind, everything. So it's hard to recover. Take your heart to it. It's hard to recover from a body shot.
As Spence is a southpaw, he's highly skilled at taking on opponents who use the orthodox stance, and he often starts with a lead jab or double jab, followed by straight left punch, which helps him to both protect himself and position himself for a strong right hook to the body. And this strategy also creates opportunities for him to deliver powerful combinations up top. While he also likes to set up the left straight or uppercut to the body, which he usually does behind the double jab too. And obviously being a southpaw, he'll also try and get himself in the outside position to get an advantageous angle when landing. Spence also likes to frame off the lead hand to set up and manipulate the opponent's head or guard before making a slight shift before targeting the body again. Interesting, looking at his past southpaw encounters, this is something he likes to do by putting you in place before looking to use quick hooks on either side. However, I don't necessarily think there'll be that many opportunities to do this to Crawford in the fight, and I suspect Crawford will try his best to get out of these situations, unless he feels he can challenge him here or counterpunch him. I guess the other area I believe Spence is much better and stronger is fighting on the inside itself, and Spence is very capable of beating you up in this area. And although former opponents feel they can maybe take him on there are very few fighters like Spence that don't stop looking to trade here, to the body and up top, and obviously being in that situation will lead him to taking a few himself. But over the years watching Spence fighting at relentless pace on the inside is just hard to come by, and quite often he'll set up those beautiful head to body combinations and look to frame off his shoulder to create a slight gap to once again keep attacking and putting on the pressure. Now from watching Crawford, he can obviously fight on the inside, and we've seen him resort to a more shoulder roll versus Avanesian so he can look to counter and trade with him. However, in my opinion, if you compare the two side by side, Spence wins this battle hands down. Not to mention Crawford does look to clench to stop you from getting work off. And if Spence can force Crawford into this fight, don't be surprised if he starts beating on him badly as the fight goes on. Now, as much as I think Spence needs to probably take the fight to Crawford at some point, there's always the possibility we see a more cautious Spence, where he looks to fight from the range behind his jab and simply be more defensively responsible. And we have seen him in fights with likes of Danny and Mikey Garcia, with them struggling to get past his lead hand. Well, Spence would look to land some pretty basic combinations behind the lead hand, including a double jab straight left combo to the head or body, helping to push them back, and then taking any opportunity when up close to pound the body. And although I believe it will suit Spence to push the pace in this fight, I could quite easily see him fight from the outside too, looking to force Crawford to come to him, just by being a little bit more defensively responsible. And let's be honest, I feel we are more likely to see Crawford look to box from the outside and look to counter him. And as discussed, Errol can sometimes lunge in as he looks to land the backhand, even when fighting from the outside. However, that's not to say Crawford can't put it on him if he finds success and lands. And Crawford is a proven finisher at 147 pounds, along with 10 KOs in his last 10 fights. And Spence needs to have some sort of respect, or he could get caught badly if he's not defensively responsible. But either way, I do feel Crawford will have a harder time if Spence was to fight this way, as it would give him less opportunities, and with Crawford coming forward, that could easily play into Spence's hands. On paper, this is a fight that is too close to call. And as you've seen through this tactical overview, both fighters possess exceptional skills, determination and a hunger for greatness. And Spence's power punching and relentless pressure will collide with Crawford's versatility and counterpunching and ability to adapt to any style. And the outcome could hinge on whether Spence can effectively cut off the ring and impose his strength, or will it be Crawford's boxing IQ and slick movement that will frustrate and neutralise his opponent. But it could very well come down to the battle of wills, strategy and heart, as each fighter brings their own set of strengths and weaknesses and tactical approaches. It could well come down to the man who stops his opponent from fighting his fight, or imposing their will on them. In the realm of boxing, where legends are born and stories unfold, this showdown transcends mere competition. Errol Spence and Terence Crawford are two exceptional warriors who symbolise the battle for supremacy, and it is a testament to their unyielding spirit that courses through their veins as fighters, pushing them to overcome obstacles and forge paths towards greatness. In the dance with their fists, we will witness a culmination of years of dedication, sacrifice and unwavering belief. Each step, each punch, resonates with the echoes of countless of hours spent in the gym honing their skills to shape their destiny. Their journeys have taken different paths along the way, promotional divisions and network boundaries, attempting to dictate their fate. But true champions defy the constraints imposed on them. They rise above the trappings of politics and rise to the call of legacy. In the tapestry of their lives, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford have also weathered storms that have tested their very essence, each of them staring into the abyss and defied the odds. For they are not just fighters, but survivors, the razor's edge of fate. Terence Crawford, a man of resilience, carries the scars and life-altering event etched upon his very well-being. A single bullet which deflected off his head, and at that moment, the trajectory of his life shifted to live the life of a champion. And Errol Spence too has endured his own harrowing event, as fate placed him on a collision course with mortality. A horrific car crash which threatened to shatter his dreams he had crafted with his own hands. But from the wreckage, he emerged battered and unbroken. And these life-altering events, these brushes with destiny, have transformed Spence and Crawford into more than just pugilists, but also remind us that we can turn adversity into triumph, and tragedy into inspiration. And as the final chapters of their stories unfold within the ring, we will bear witness to more than a battle of supremacy. Spence versus Crawford, a collision of destiny, with their journey and scars bearing witness to the depth of their courage and resilience and their unwavering commitment to the pursuit of greatness. On July 29th, all will be revealed on who is the best. This has been Jamie from Boxing Life. I hope you enjoyed this tactical overview. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Spence versus Crawford. I'm sure there will be much debate on who you think will win come fight night. Enjoy it when it comes, and as always guys, I'll see you in the next one.